All right, so put your finger on your head where you have hair. Now move it to where you don't. You'll notice that where you have hair, it's flat. And where you don't have hair, your head is sloped. If you feel around even more, you'll notice that the flat, sloped contours of your head perfectly outline your hairline. This is not a coincidence. Your head wasn't always like this. It used to be a lot flatter. And now it's turning into a giant egg for some reason. And that's a problem because you can't grow hair on an egg. If any of this is making sense to you, maybe this video will be helpful. Because if you haven't figured it out by now, pharmaceuticals don't work. This is what I do for my hair loss. This is Medical Misinformation with Fames Jurgensen. So, if you made it this far, you realize that your scalp is a slopey, misshapen mess, and that your pattern hair loss perfectly correlates to your own skull's unique grotesqueness. So what do you do about it? Well, just jam it back into place. Use your male instincts. So skulls respond to small, consistent forces over time. It's called bone remodeling, and it's the reason you're in this mess in the first place. The good news is that if your head can warp out of shape, it could go from flat to slope, then theoretically it can warp back into shape, go from slope to flat, given enough time. So what I do is I do skull compressions, small consistent forces that are aimed at flattening certain parts of my head. So for example, I have a lot of curvature at the top of my forehead, and I have a lot of curvature on the top of my head at the hairline. And then I have a long distance from the front of my forehead to my temple hairline. All really bad things for your hair. So what I do is I do this skull compression, which aims at flattening this and also at least reduce this distance or at least keep it at bay. And then I'll do headstands to flatten out this rounding up here. I'll do this 3 times a day with intermittent massaging, and then I'll also, which I'll get to in a bit, and then I'll also do compressions like this and this one, and these are aimed at keeping my skull flat, which is easier than flattening because you see bones are hard and it takes them a long time to move. So prevention is easier than the cure, as usual. The other thing is that to facilitate the process, to make it easier, it'd be nice if you could remove the forces that are causing your skull to warp out of shape in the first place. And in order to do that, you need to address your poor craniofacial development, which is part 2. So, you're ugly because you're bald, but you're also bald because you're ugly. And the reason you're ugly is because your face didn't grow properly. Health belies beauty, and so lack of beauty, i.e. ugly face, implies poor health. If you're bald, then you have a health problem, and the health problem is you can't breathe well. In order to breathe well, which is kind of important because you have to do it every few seconds, then you need to have a wide dental arch, which correlates to wide nasal air pathways, good airflow, and you need to have a forward-angled maxilla, that's this frontal bone, which creates a more direct path from your nose to your lungs, as opposed to flat face. Air's got to go up, make a 180-degree turn, and come back down. And if you don't have these things, you have poor airflow, then your body will contort your face to get good airflow under suboptimal conditions, and this will manifest in the form of deviated septums, asymmetrical facial features, protruding and rounding of the forehead, and bring the nose out there, which ultimately kicks off this chain reaction of top-heavy head, tight muscles, tight galea, skull remodeling, resulting in pattern hair loss. So theoretically, more on that on the next few segments. So theoretically, if you can restructure your face to improve airflow, then you can cut off the chain reaction that leads to pattern hair loss. So you need to figure out a way to widen your dental arch and push your maxilla bone forward. The good news is that more than anything else, this will vastly improve your health as well as make you better looking. The bad news is that this is extremely difficult to do as an adult and will likely require some expensive surgery or orthodontic intervention. I have an ALP appliance, which maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. I don't know, seems to be working, but you have to look into it for yourself. Now, the reason that your face didn't grow properly is because of, among other things, but the main things are lack of breastfeeding as an infant, insufficient chewing, and poor oral posture, poor tongue posture. So while adopting these habits now, you won't get the full benefit from them as a grown man, especially the breastfeeding. At the very least, it'll help your face prevent it from getting any worse, as well as complement whatever orthodontic intervention that you decide to do, which again is the most important part. So for now, keep your tongue pressed up against the roof of your mouth and increase your chewing so you can chew gum, or better yet, adopt a diet that requires more chewing, because that's probably the diet you should have been eating this whole time, such as eating pounds and pounds of animal flesh. More on that in another video. So while you're adopting these habits and figuring out what you want to do about widening your dental arch surgically or appliance-wise, what you can do in the meantime is move up the hair loss chain to the next chain or whatever and address chronic scalp perimeter muscle tension. Part 3. So your neck muscles are designed to support a normal upright head, not a bulbous, saggy, top-heavy one, which is exactly what you get when you have a narrow jaw and a flat face. Things get really top-heavy, which force your neck muscles to work extra hard doing their job, keeping your head from falling off. Combine that with modern living, you're sitting down all day, looking at your precious little smartphone, and these muscles around your head are going to be really, really tight from being overworked. And that's a problem because these tight muscles are connected to this muscle up here, which contains a delicate blood vessel network that delivers blood and nutrients to your hair follicles. It's not a robust network like the sides of your head. It's very delicate. It's vulnerable. So when you have these tight muscles around your head, it's going to pull the top muscle, stretch it tight, which is going to compress those blood vessels containing all those little nutrients, and that's not good for your hair in and of itself. Furthermore, the way that these muscles are situated, you got 2 in the front, 2 in the back, and when they're compressed, it seems like to me like the greatest stretch is going to be from center to center along the sides of your scalp. So pushing down small consistent forces over time in this area, eroding the flat part of your hairline, pushing the sides out, creating that sexy egg shape, further stretching out the capillary network, further reducing blood flow to like a negative feedback loop of tightness and blood flow being stretched and erosion and blood flow and blood vessels being stretched, ultimately causing pattern hair loss that progresses with the rate of erosion of your hairline. And it doesn't happen so much here as it does here. 2 muscles here stretching there. This part seems to be spared for a while, but as your head becomes more and more of an egg, then this will start to go too. All right, so what do you do about these chronically tense muscles? Well, you can do it the expensive way, which is you can go get Botox injections, which actually has some studies to back it up, improving hair counts on your head. Or if you don't like the idea of spending thousands of dollars injecting bacteria and chemicals into your head to make your muscles relax, then what you can do is just massage the area, the neck muscles and the perimeter, which is what I do. I do it throughout the day. If I feel like I've been sitting down a while, I'll do it. But I mostly do it centered around the skull compression sets that I do 3 times a day. This is a good temporary solution until you can figure out how to restructure your face and actually accomplish it, which will relieve the tension naturally because you'll have an upright, balanced head. The other thing you can do to facilitate the straightening of your neck and hence the reduction of the load on your neck muscles is work on your posture, work on your back muscles to bring your shoulders back, and work on your glutes to keep them contracted so you're more upright, and this will help straighten your neck. And you can even gain a ½ an inch of height and not walk around like a dejected loser all the time with your head down. See, all these interventions have positive side effects, unlike drugs. And one other thing you can do is put magnesium oil around your muscles, because magnesium will relax muscles as well. All right, so if somehow miraculously you are able to restructure your face to make it like this perfect anatomically correct human skull and relieve all your scalp perimeter muscle tension, then you still have to address the slick bald areas of your scalp, because no amount of restructuring or scalp perimeter muscle tension relief is going to regrow hair on slick bald scalp. Rather, you're going to have to break up fibrosis. I think it's part 4. So your hair follicles are dying from lack of blood flow and nutrients. They'll want to not die. So what they'll do is ask your body for help, signaling that they need more blood and nutrients, evoking the body's inflammatory response. So the body comes in, flushes the air with blood and nutrients, and in an attempt to restore normal blood flow. The problem is that the underlying issue has not been resolved, so this inflammatory response becomes chronic. Body's hair follicles are constantly asking the body for more blood nutrients. But the problem with that is that every time the body responds with inflammation, it's got to cool and undo the inflammation with calcification. And calcification is a cooling process. Inflammation is warming. It's got to be countered with some cooling. So every time, so you get these calcified deposits every time you have an inflammation response, and this ultimately will thicken and toughen the area under the skin with these calcified fibers, and then the capillary network will have to fight even more through these new hard calcified fibers to deliver blood nutrients to your hair. So it'll reduce blood flow even more, ironically, if you're trying to restore blood flow, and then you actually make it worse, compounding the negative effect, getting that negative feedback loop of poor blood flow. And this visibly will be seen, the calcified fiber will be seen as slick, thick, tough, shiny scalp on totally bald guys, or people who have a scar on their head where hair no longer grows. So this is called fibrosis, and it needs to be broken up before you can restore normal blood flow and hope to regrow hair. So the way you break up fibrosis, calcification, is with more inflammation, but this time acute inflammation. So short and strong versus long and mild. You have some options for how you want to, or how you can apply the acute inflammation to your bald areas. One is you could light your head on fire. 2, you can jab sharp needles into your head. Or 3, you can sting yourself with bees. Now, I've done microneedling in the past, but you could lighting your hair on fire. Fire does work, because there's an old guy that fell into a fire, got a 3rd-degree burn, and when it healed, started regrowing hair on his bald head, which hadn't been there in 60 years. So microneedling has documented success both anecdotally and in clinical studies. I've never had anything amazing happen with it, so I'm trying the bees. So what I'll do is last few weeks I've been doing some light derma rolling, and then I'll rub bee venom into my head. I haven't really worked up the courage to get a live bee sting me on the temples. But yeah, if that doesn't work, I'll try torching my scalp. All right, let's talk about diet. So some of you who saw my last video on hair loss are probably wondering, hey Thames, what's the deal with all this face and head shape bullcrap? I thought you said that it was diet that reversed your hair loss. And while yes, that was misleading, but it was a comedy video, and this is also turning into kind of a comedy video despite my best efforts, but I'm trying to be informative. But yes, it's still all diet. Your diet screwed up your face, and that's what screwed up your hair. So if ultimately your diet caused all your hair to fall out, then you should probably change your diet. It can't undo all the damage, but it can improve the health of your existing hair and give you a temporary thickness boost while you're waiting for the other therapies to take effect, as well as prevent the further degradation of your facial structure and thus prevent further hair loss. If you didn't see the last video, I noticed a decrease in shedding and thus improvement in hair thickness weeks after doing a gap style elimination diet. And I think that's because I had elevated levels of inflammation in my body from a damaged gut, which exacerbates hair loss because inflammation is part of the hair loss cycle of death. And so these already inflamed areas are becoming more inflamed, causing more shedding, and a worsening of the appearance of my hair. And then when I healed my gut, then it lowered inflammation and reduced the shedding, and thus improved the health of my existing hair. It didn't do anything about pattern hair loss, but it made my hair look better. Or maybe my new bacteria gut constitution, I don't know what. All I know is that it works. So if you want that temporary thickness boost, then introduce or incorporate or emphasize foods that are healing to the gut, like broth from grass-fed animals and milk, raw milk kefir from grass-fed animals, except for cows, goats, sheep, and such. And then minimize or eliminate foods that are irritating the gut, like plants. I had to, at least temporarily, I had to eliminate all plants, but I reintroduced them in phases. I eat 3 plants now, but only after being thoroughly boiled in broth. I also like to incorporate foods that require vigorous chewing that are also animal-based and thus inflammation-friendly in order to foster proper facial structure development. And that's why I eat lots of raw meat, raw steak, and raw organs. Organs have the additional benefit of providing you nutrients, the missing nutrients in the right ratios that you didn't have as a kid when you're trying to develop a well-formed face. Now, I should mention that I've only had success on my current hair loss protocol while doing extreme elimination dieting, so I think it is important. That said, on to the conclusion. In conclusion, I don't know if any of this works. I think it does. I think it makes sense. What I do know for certain, however, is that science is never going to come up with a cure for male pattern baldness because, number one, their approach is way off base. To me, it's clearly craniofacial development and head shape. Guys who are bald have weird head shapes and poor craniofacial development without exception. And number two is that science is all fake. It's propaganda. Their focus is not to help us or to make our lives any better, but rather to deceive us and to make us sick. For that reason, as well as I haven't been censored in over a year, I am announcing that my next target is science. I'm going after science, scientific misinformation. Maybe that'll get their attention, and maybe I'll get murdered. I don't know. Some of the stuff goes pretty deep. So we'll see what happens. But if you're religious, pray for me.